Love God with all thy heart. Love God with all thy heart. Why? We Americans like to ask why. Because love is the greatest power in the universe. It is the great drawing power of God. It is tremendous. You sometimes experience a little of it in human love, family love. And that is wonderful. But if you can supersede that and contact the reservoir from which that human love comes, then you will feel and know the power of God's love. That's why in our reading this morning we spoke about allowing God's love to heal all diseases of body, mind, and soul, or to settle all problems, because it is God Himself. It is the feeling aspect of God's great consciousness manifesting and moving. The Spirit of God moved. And when that Spirit moves, it becomes a great force of creation, the great repulsive force, and also the greater force of the attractive force pulling all things back to God. That's what love is. It isn't just that little emotion you felt perhaps in your younger days and it just roped you in, so to speak, and you took your part in life. That's fine. But change that now. Look within and change that small love, so to speak, to the great attractive pull of God's presence. Divine love, unconditioned, eternal, inexhaustible, all-fulfilling. Such is the power of God's love. That's why we read in the Scriptures in Matthew. We read this about love, which is most wonderful. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus answered and said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Think of it. Now you can understand why you should settle your problems by love. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Everything depends on love because God is love. God is love. Two great forces. When the Spirit of God moved, when His consciousness moved, one great force went out from him, the force of repulsion. And it was that force that created the Word, the holy vibration, from which vibration all things come. That's the great creative force, is in that holy vibration. Science is showing it all the time. That even heavy metals are vibrating light, which God created. That's an aspect of the holy vibration. And not only all metals and all things are vibrating light, but mind itself has been shown scientifically to be very fast-moving particles of light. That's why your mind can travel anywhere so fast, because of its tremendous speed, even greater than the ordinary light with which we are familiar, traveling 186,000 miles a second. Think of it. God is the only one. He's the one. And His aspect, the greatest aspect, is love. Not the repulsion, which is wonderful. He's made all these things, created all things. But isn't it far greater to know that attractive pull of God which pulls all those things which God has created back unto Himself? That's why love is so tremendous. It is the greatest force in the universe, the great attractive pull of God. And so divine love, as I have said, is that which we need, that which we must have. Repulsion has made this created universe, but It was the feeling aspect of God, the great attractive aspect which drew all things together from that great force of repulsion and made all things. It is the manifesting of that holy vibration, the Word, which has produced all things from the one great light of God. It is that great attractive force which has pulled all things so that we see the sun and the planets around it being kept right in their orbits because of the attractive pull of God. And we have seen all things formed from the little molecules, the atoms, the molecules, the cells, and everything held together how? By this pull of God. The universe is made and order is maintained by the attractive force, not the repulsive force. That's great, but it is that great force of love which can curb this repulsive force and hold it together, making universe upon universe and even our bodies. It is that great force of the love of God, the attraction, which is the main force in the universe. Let us realize that. It is this great force of God which has drawn together these great flying apart particles of repulsion into ether, into gases, and finally into solids, into the mineral kingdom, into the vegetable kingdom, and finally into the animal kingdom. It is that pull of God pulling things back, making these different aspects of creation. And it is that same great pull of God which you feel sometimes greatly in your heart. That's naturally implanted in your heart, the great love of the infant, that pulling power. And when it gets hold of you, when you have gotten rid of the impediments which prevent its flow, then you will realize what the force of God's love is. We have to remove those things, that's all. So this great pull of God finally ends up how, so to speak? It is that power which is drawing every particle of creation, including every atom in your body and my body, and all bodies, in all things, back home to the one consciousness of God. Now do you see why it's the greatest force in the universe? In a few words, it's difficult to put it before you plainly, but that's what is happening. What is the force that holds the atoms together? What is the force that holds the planets in their orbits and the different universes and all those things of creation? It is this attractive force of God pulling all things back to Him. That's the feeling aspect of God. The Spirit of God moves. The force aspect is repulsion. The feeling aspect is love. God is not just an idea. The most scientific thing, so to speak, is God. So that's what divine love is, which holds you together, so to speak, and then holds the body, atoms of the body together, and holds the family together. And finally, those who turn to God, they are never separated no matter what happens. Let the universe fly apart. They will not be disturbed, because that's God's love itself. That's why it's so necessary to understand to love God with all thy heart. Now we come to the question, what is it that prevents this great love of God being felt by each one of us and consciously understood? The love of God has to be understood in the heart, and the impediments of the heart prevent any one of us from understanding and feeling the great pull of God's love. Master used to say to me many times, the heart must be of pure gold. Any dross in that prevents the natural flow of God's love so that you know it in a conscious way. The impediments of the heart, there are 8 of them. I will not name them, except to say meanness is one. Meanness is the greatest. The pure in heart shall know God. Those who have none of those obstructions, it is not necessary to tell you what they are. You know what they are. Get rid of them. How? By the practice of yoga, following the techniques of Raja Yoga, which our Master has left, will enable you to do away with these meannesses meannesses of the heart. They are impediments. Get rid of them, because they prevent you from attaining the heritage which is yours, God's love. With that, all problems will be solved. Everything melts into the infinite love of God. So we must be free from these impediments. We must know this divine love. And the force of divine love is very important. Let me read just a reference from our Master, from his little book, The Master Said, in which he points this out so wonderfully. It is beautiful to think that the Lord loves us all equally. So don't think you are a sinner. That's a lie. The soul never sins. The outward play of the drama of life includes sin, good and evil. But the soul is far above that. God's love is your soul, that's all. We must know that, realize it. And so, going on, this visitor said, but it seems unjust that he should care as much for a sinner as a saint. That's our conception, that's all. God's is different because he sees both sides of the picture. And so it says, Master says, is a diamond less valuable because it is covered with mud? Is your soul less valuable because it's covered up with these impediments and attachments and all sorts of things? No, that doesn't change. The gold in the Himalayas, though covered by that mountainous structure, is the same. So is our soul. God sees the changeless beauty of our souls. It's a good thing, isn't it? He knows we are not our mistakes. God understands you when everyone else misunderstands you. Everyone. Even your parents sometimes misunderstand you. He is the lover who cherishes you always. No matter what your mistakes, others give you their affection for a while and then forsake you. But he abandons you never. His mercy endureth forever is what we read in our scriptures. That's what it means. How can God's own consciousness forsake a part of his consciousness in you and me under the delusion of duality? He can't do it. And he doesn't do it. We think he does, that's all. The countless ways God is daily seeking your love. He doesn't punish you if you refuse him, but you punish yourself. That's his law. You find that all things betray thee who betrayest me. That's from Master's poem, The Hound of Heaven. There's no security in anything but God, is what it means. So let us realize these wonderful truths given by our Master. Now going on just a little bit, why should we love God? As God is loving us, we should at least return that love. And I remember the Master said many times, God is crying for us more than we are crying for him. He wants us more than we want him. So we should at least return that love. But greatest of all is that love is the key, so to speak, to eternal life. You cannot get there any other way. You may be the smartest person that lived. You may know philosophy. You may practice your techniques of self-realization, and you may attain the light at the spiritual eye. You may see all the visions of light. But you cannot have eternal life without love, because God is love. And so from our own Bible, let us read these two references. From John, the 4th chapter. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. Can't you see why the great attractive force of God is love is important? It's the most important thing. He that loveth not knoweth not God, and that means everybody. Not just your own people, but everything in the universe, every race, everyone of every color, race, or creed. You cannot escape it. He that loveth not knoweth not God, and knoweth not God, for God is love. And from going on from that same book of 1 John, beloved, if God so loved us, Master says it the same way. God is crying for us more than we're crying for him. Now, if God does that, we ought also to love one another, because isn't it the same consciousness in each one of us? It's the same. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. That is, it not only flows through us, but it changes us and is perfected. That is, it can express itself through us because we are one with him. And from Jeremiah, these are our own scriptures, as you know, 31st chapter. The Lord hath appeared of old unto me, saying, Yea, I have loved thee with an everlasting love, and therefore with everlasting kindness and loving kindness have I drawn thee. We don't search out God. He draws us through love. Everlasting. These are wonderful passages in our own scriptures. So, why are these two commandments so important I read in the beginning? First, because without love you cannot attain anything that's worthwhile. And secondly, you cannot attain eternal life without it. Sri Yukteswarji, our master's guru, so to speak, has written this about the virtue of love, which I will read, and I want you to remember it. The virtue of love. This heart's natural love is the principal thing to attain a holy life. When this love, the heavenly gift of nature, appears in the heart, it removes all exciting causes from the system and cools it down to a perfectly normal state, invigorating the vital powers, excretes all foreign matters, the germs of diseases from it by natural ways, perspiration and so forth. Don't you see why on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets, even that of sickness? Everything can be cleared up, so to speak, by love. Everything. Turn to that rather than too much medicine. Of course, we have to have the medicine. We're living in this world of delusion, and medicine's a delusion. It works. All right, let's use it. But let's not forget the power behind the medicine, which is God. And when this happens, this makes man perfectly healthy in body and mind. That's why these two laws supersede, these two commandments supersede all laws. Because God is love. The fountainhead certainly can take care of its part, and we are parts of his one great consciousness. Now, going on just a little bit, when we are healthy in body and mind, and with the love of God realized, it enables the devotee to understand the proper guidance of nature. When this love becomes developed in man, it makes him able to understand his own position, his real position, the position of his own soul as well as the soul of those with whom he comes in contact. You say, love thy neighbor. And you take the ordinary person in the different countries, what do? They fight all the time. Look what's going on. Why? Because they do not understand these two laws. If they did, they would love one another. They wouldn't be fighting as they are all the time. And finally, great Sri Yukteswarji says, with the help of this developed love, man becomes fortunate in getting the godlike company of divine personages and their teachings, and is saved forever. How can you be saved forever following one who hasn't realized eternal life, like our beloved Guru? That's how it works. So those of you who have been called to this path are fortunate. Realize that, because here you are, proof that you've been called. Millions do not think of God at all. They don't want to think of Him. They don't want to hear His name. But we do, because His love has touched us. Hence, the culture of this love, concludes Sri Yukteswarji, the heavenly gift is the principal thing for the attainment of holy salvation. It is beyond doubt that it is impossible for man to advance a step toward the same without it. Now, those of you who still fight a little bit, let's get over it. It is necessary, it's sensible, because we have the word of one of our great saints. In delusion, in outward consciousness, it's very easy to get all hot under the collar, so to speak. But get hot under the collar, but don't let it get in. Keep the heart pure in God's love. Now comes the question, how to develop this love? How to develop this great love of which I have been speaking? Or how to increase your devotion? Men especially say to me, how do you increase devotion? Men do not have as much feeling, so to speak, as the ladies do. It's very easy for them to feel very bad one minute, and the next very good, way up, then way down they go. Because they have more of that feeling aspect in them. Now when that goes way up, so to speak, that's emotion. Now, if you take that emotion, which is none other than God's great consciousness and force in you, running out through the motor nerves, if you take that and turn it inward toward the seat of the soul, which is in the spinal region, and one of those centers in the spine is the heart center, if you turn it in toward that, it becomes devotion. Instead of being so emotional, like the holy rollers rolling up and down the aisle, it becomes a great calm feeling of God's presence. That's how you do it. Ordinarily, the great force of God's presence within us is going outward, especially in those who live too much on the sensual plane. Otherwise, how do you enjoy things? How do you enjoy the flowers or all sorts of things? Except that the current within you is going out toward the senses. And that's why we have to turn it back in toward the seat of the soul. And the soul is none other than God's love. If you can do that, then your devotion increases. And so emotion must be changed. Must be changed to devotion. Emotion is good, but unless it runs away with you, because when you have lots of emotion, you turn it in and it becomes lots of devotion. Let us not be afraid if we are a little emotional, but remember, ordinary emotion goes out through the motor nerves, and before you can psychologically control it, the big fight is on. That's what it is. So don't let it go out through the motor nerves. Turn it in. And when you feel like doing that, just count 10 or 20 or whatever will stop you. Turn it in. Feel the presence of God. So we must change. We must change emotion to devotion. It must be turned back on itself. Then it becomes devotion. That's the secret. Now, the most effective method is this. The most effective method of changing your emotion to devotion or developing devotion, which will finally culminate in love, is the practice of Raja Yoga, or the highest techniques of yoga. Why? Because when you practice yoga, the current which normally goes out in an ordinary person living in the world is turned back on itself, and then it goes to the spine. And the upper centers of the spine, especially the medulla, the heart center, the medulla center, and the supreme center in the brain. Now that's where the soul resides. It doesn't reside on the end of the finger or in the tongue. Those are sensations. It resides deep within you, in your heart, in the upper centers of the brain, where God and His angels dwell. That's where love is. That's where your soul is. Now if you can turn the great presence of God, which is using up its strength, going out into matter and so forth, if you can turn it in on itself to those places, can't you see love is stimulated? That's the main thing. That's the main reason why we should all practice the techniques of Raja Yoga, because it takes the current which is going out in this world and being taken up and attached to that world, or this world, it turns it back to the seat of the soul. That's the first step. Then you'll feel God's love. You feel different than you will with outward love. Feeling that love, the last step is to merge in it. Be one with it. Those of you who've ever been in love, you know there comes a time when there's no two, you're just it, that's all. You have the lady you want to see, and you just got to see her, and you merge and become one. So it is with God. God is the greatest beloved, Master said. And he gives us a little illustration of that in family or worldly love. Turn it in. Turn it in to the seat of the soul, and then you'll realize that heavenly gift of nature, which is God's love implanted naturally in the heart. And I'll close by reading one of Master's, from one of his little books, which I know you'll enjoy. He says things so wonderfully. Why? Because he has experienced those things, that's all. He has lived it. He has felt it. And so he gives us the way to realize. Once a disciple said, "It is not that I don't want to know God, but I seem unable to direct love toward him. What should one do who is like myself, experiencing a dry state?" It's awful difficult. It's very difficult to get out of those states. Now listen what the Master says. You should not concentrate on the thought that you lack devotion. No. But should work to develop it. Why be upset because God hasn't shown himself to you? Think of the long time that you have ignored him. Incarnations, we haven't thought of God even. Then he goes on. A student was dubious about his powers of spiritual perseverance. The Master said this, and it applies to every one of us. The Lord is not distant, but near. I see him everywhere, says the Master. But, sir, you are a master, the man protested. Then he said, all souls are equal. The only difference between you and me is that I made the effort. I showed God that I love him, and he came to me. Love is the magnet from which God cannot escape. So there you have the answer why you should love God with all your heart, because he can escape from everything else, but he cannot escape from his own love implanted naturally in the soul of each one of us.